Hello, I think you should lose some weight. Why are you so fat and ugly? Don't you look at yourself in the mirror? He noticed something as he moved closer to Adanne. Her eyes were fixated on a spot and she held a white cane. He waved his hands in her face and found out she was blind. A long time ago, in the beautiful city of Ibadan, there lived a young man called Midday. Midday is a very handsome man, often admired by the old, young, married, and unmarried women in the city of Ibadan. His light yet sonorous voice leaves the women drooling over him, and every maiden would often wish to have him as their husband. When Midday was growing up, he often bullied the not so attractive males and females around him at every chance he got. Midday would often ask them, "Why do you look so ugly? Are your parents this ugly too?" He lost a lot of friends due to this, and instead of changing his ways, Midday's behavior got worse. As a result, everyone avoided him like a plague. While growing up, his mother would often tell him to stop being rude and blunt about people's looks and shape because no one knows tomorrow. His mother advised him one time, "You may be handsome today, but you do not know what may happen to you the next minute. No one knows what will happen tomorrow. God is the creator of all beings, and He alone chooses to give you whatever face He deems fit. So why should you judge people based on what they cannot change?" And Mide would often reply, "Mama, I know a lot of people can't change how they look, but they could have prevented it by getting married to beautiful or handsome people. How would an ugly person decide to get married to someone who is less attractive to them and expect to have a fine child? So basically, it's their fault." Mide's mother would disagree and explain to him, "No one is born ugly, Mide my son. Please, try to look beyond beauty and stop making the people around you feel miserable." But Mide would often justify his action with various reasons, and with time, his mother couldn't do much since he felt he was all grown up and didn't need to advise him. One day, Mide was walking along a forest path, going on an errand for his mother when he saw a pretty fat girl walking by. Her name is Adanne. Adanne had just lost both her parents to flooding. She was taking a walk around the community after a long week of crying and mourning when Mide spotted her. Mide walked towards her and he began to talk. "Hello, I think you should lose some weight. Why are you so fat and ugly? Don't you look at yourself in the mirror?" He noticed something as he moved closer to Adanne. Her eyes were fixated on a spot and she held a white cane. He waved his hands in her face and found out she was blind. "Wow, you are also blind?" he exclaimed. "What a bad combination. Fat, ugly, and blind," he said sarcastically. Adanne stood there, not knowing what to do. She began to cry and simply turned back, going towards her home. Adanne was alone. Her parents' relatives had told her to come with them after her parents' burial, but she refused because she doesn't want to become a burden to anyone. She sat inside her hut, thinking about Mide's words, which stung more than anything, and an overwhelming feeling of inadequacy engulfed her. Tears welled up in her eyes and she began to cry. Suddenly, she got up from where she seated as she walked towards the kitchen. She recalled how she lost many friends as a result of a sudden weight gain and sight loss, which started when she got to her puberty age. Her mother, who used to tell her how beautiful she looks, is no more, and her dad, who would call her his angel, is dead too. With her mind made up, Adanne sniffed the substances in the kitchen until she perceived the rat poison used by her late mother. Without thinking twice, she gulped it all down at once. A few minutes later, Adanne fell to the ground as the effect of the poison began to kick in. She held her stomach, writhing in pain, and within minutes, Adanne took her final breath. Meanwhile, Mide had gotten back home and was having his lunch when his mother rushed in to share the news of Adanne's death. Mide was surprised to hear this. He told his mother that he saw her earlier that day and he even advised her to lose some weight. His mother was very angry and she asked him why he would say such thing to someone who had just lost her parents and a blind person for that matter. But Mide replied, "How do I know she has just lost her parents when I'm not rich?" "Well, that doesn't matter. I only advised her to work on looking better. I didn't ask her to poison herself." Mide defended himself. "Mide, what kind of a child are you? I heard she poisoned herself because she couldn't bear her parents' loss, and her sight loss and weight gain is a burden to her. We saw the suicide notes she left behind. Midday, your harsh words must have been too much for her to bear. Why are you so heartless?" His mother sobs as she hit him on his chest. Midday left the room and continued his food outside without any bother or feeling of remorse. The next day, Midday continued being mischievous and even got worse. Whenever his peers who were married gave birth, Midday would visit them without being invited and he would blame them for having an ugly child whenever he sees the baby. Sometimes he would advise them to hide the baby away from public eyes to prevent people from insulting the baby. But some people would send him away and tell him never to come back, while some others would cry and cry. Still, all this did not stop Mide from saying hurtful words to his friends. Whenever they tell him to stop being shallow minded and be kind for once, he would reply that he is often surprised that ugly men would settle for ugly girls and expect to bear beautiful children. "As for me, I can never give birth to an ugly child because I will get married to the most beautiful girl in this village," he will often brag. A few years later, Mehdi began to think of getting married, but none of the maidens in his village were ready to settle down with someone like him. This is because the news of Adanne's death had spread like wildfire, and the villagers knew that Mide must have been the one who said those hurtful words to her. Although Mide cannot be punished for it because there was no evidence. So, when all the beautiful girls did not accept his proposal, Mide decided to relocate to Ogun, a nearby village. While there, he met a very beautiful young lady, Omi, and he got married to her in weeks. Mide was happy that she agreed to marry him. He took her to his village in Ibadan and flaunted her around to spite the ladies who rejected his proposal. The maidens would shake their heads in pity, and some will even throw warning glances at Omi. But Omi, who was in love, would dismiss the looks, believing the women were simply jealous of her. 2 years after the marriage, Mide welcomed his first child, Ade, and people came from near and far around Ogun village to celebrate with them. Mide is happy that his dream of giving birth to a beautiful child has finally come to pass. He would brag about his wife's beauty and his son's handsomeness, and he would make others feel like their life is not perfect. He would often say, "If I had married the maidens from my village, I wouldn't have met my wonderful Omi here in Ogun. I'm so blessed to have her, and I'm happy that I made the best decision of my life. Look at my baby, Ade. He's the cutest baby ever born." He would flaunt his child wherever he goes and at every given opportunity, and some people would congratulate him, while some people would wonder if doing such a thing is actually necessary. 3 months after the birth of his son, he did notice that his baby had not begun to move his eyes around, and when he tried poking his finger in his eyes, he did not blink. He continued to do this, and by the time the baby was 6 months, he found out he was blind. Midi was shocked and wondered why his baby would be blind. He took the baby to several witch doctors, but none of them could provide a solution to his baby's blindness. After trying everything to ensure that his baby regains his sight without success, he began to misbehave towards his wife, Umi. He would blame her for birthing an invalid and imply that her family must have had such a history and she hid it away from him. Umi would take offense at first, but as time went on, she would ignore him. Soon, Mide stops Omi from bringing Ade outside the house to prevent people from mocking them. Omi would wonder why he would hide his own child, and she would ask him many times, but Mide would tell her it's for her own good. 1 year after the birth of Ade, Mide totally abandoned him and he couldn't even bear to take him around like he always did when he was baby. He did not think much about his son's sight again, and soon he began to think of having another child. Perhaps if I have another child, I wouldn't have to bother about the invalid son she bore for me, he thought aloud. That night, he went to his wife's hut and asked her to forgive him for abandoning her. Omi was surprised and she had no choice but to forgive him. He then told her of his intention to try for another child. She refused at first with the excuse that her present child need her now more than ever, but she agreed after much pestering from him. A few weeks later, she found that she's pregnant while nursing her first child at the same time. It wasn't an easy experience for Omi, but she did her best to help her little baby walk and start feeding himself despite his condition. Even though Midday promised to change, he never did. Most of the time, he would abandon his wife and avoid his blind child at all costs. He would only go home to eat and stay with his friends after that. Months later, his wife's pregnancy is due for the second baby, and Midday was happy that he would finally become a father to a complete child. After hearing the sound of his newborn baby, he went inside to see his baby and he was shocked at what he saw. His baby had two skins. One side of its body is light and the other side is dark. The baby also has big bulging eyes. Midday ran off when he saw the baby, screaming for help. The midwife was surprised at Midday's behavior. She tried to stop him, but he was far gone. Komi was surprised that her husband would react that way at a newborn baby, and it broke her heart. Days after the birth of his baby, Midday refused to go home to his wife, and when he got back home, he continued the usual treatment of abandoning her and her children. Now, Komi had to care for her first blind child, Ade, and the newborn, Dara, but the burden was too much for her. Many times, she would beg Midday to help out with childcare, but he would ignore her or even scream at her to leave him alone. 2 years later, Midday couldn't stand to look at his kids and he left home for a faraway village. He left a letter for Omi, telling her that he no longer wants to be with her or have anything to do with her invalid children. Omi cried and cried, but there was nothing she could do. But regardless of her situation, Omi took great care of her kids and showered them with lots of love. By the time Ade was 3, she started reading stories to him and teaching him how to spell. She also taught him how to use his white cane, and by the time he was 5, he could go on little errands without being held or assisted. Omi would often tell her 2 kids, "There is ability in disability. Do not let anyone make you feel like a lesser human. You are special and unique in your own way." Even though they were born different, Ade and Iwe were the brightest kids in the village. As they grew up, they began to show people that being born different doesn't make them a lesser human. They would gather the young and old invalid in the village and share motivating stories to keep them strong. And soon, Ade and Iwe were well known around the village. When Ade was 10, a group of doctors from the United Nations heard his story and they decided to help him regain his sight. Omi's joy knew no bounds as she danced and danced, happy that her child would finally be able to see. The surgery was a success and Ade regained his sight. A few days later, Omi took her child, Ade, along with Iwe to thank the doctors at their office, and she offered them a basket of fruits. One of the doctors saw Iwe and he was marveled at her skin. He complimented her skin condition and asked to see her mother in private. He explained to her that her daughter's skin condition is rare and he would like her to be a model for a company. The idea is to show that they value all their customers regardless of their skin condition, race or color. Omi was delighted and she did not think twice before accepting the offer. The doctor asked her to prepare Iwe to travel with him to the United States to begin a modeling journey. Within months, Umi's life changed for the better, and all this was possible because of her children, whom her husband abandoned and called invalid. 10 years later, Umi was sitting outside her home when she saw a man walking towards their home. The man has wobbly hands and shaky legs, and as he moved towards her, she found his mouth shaking. She got up from where she was sitting to look at the man closely, and she found that it was Mide. She wanted to be sure, so she asked him, and with a shaky voice, he replied, "It is me, Midday, your husband." Homie stood there, speechless and surprised. She checked Midday from head to toe, and she was surprised at the change. "What happened to you, Midday?" Omi asked. "My wife, I am very sorry for treating you the way I did. I did not understand why it took me so long to understand that there is ability in disability and people have no power over their looks. I am very sorry. Now I know better." Ome continued to stare at him. After a long silence, she asked him, "How did you change your mind? What really happened?" Hmm, it's a long story, my wife. After leaving home, I settled in a faraway village with a beautiful woman, and we had 5 beautiful kids within a few years. I was a very happy and fulfilled man until 5 years ago. My beautiful children and their mother were a big pain in the neck for me. None of the 5 children were compassionate towards me. They would often cause problems for me, and I soon became a laughingstock among the villagers. They would steal and lie, and their mother would even support them. At a point, I was so frustrated that I tried sending them away, but they would often threaten to kill me if I ever tried sending them away again. I had no choice but to watch every bad thing they did. One day, I was working on the farm when someone rushed to tell me that my son had beaten someone and the person had fainted. When I got there, the people beat me mercilessly. A few weeks later, I developed a stroke due to excessive thinking. I couldn't stand on my own or even feed myself. My wife and children left me after a few days and I was alone. It was the most lonely period of my life. Despite my condition, I had to fend for myself. It was at this moment that it dawned on me that I haven't been a nice person. I saw hell and I experienced exactly what other people I have mocked were experiencing. After days of thinking and regret, I went to my mother's village and she was unhappy to see me the way I was. But she began to take care of me. The villagers there showed me hell. Some kids would throw stones at me and my peers avoided me. When I asked my mother why the villagers were treating me that way, she replied, "Mide, you hurt a lot of people in this village and they never forgot. Have you forgotten how you insult anyone who doesn't seem complete to you? How Adanne committed suicide because of your harsh words? Have you forgotten?" Her words took me down memory lane, and I knew that I've done a lot of damage to a lot of people, and even if I seek their forgiveness, they will never forget. Nevertheless, I went to seek forgiveness at Adanne's tomb and apologized to a few people that were still around. But still, I have to live with this condition for the rest of my life. I know better now than to mock anyone regardless of their situation. Mide sobbed as he finished telling his story, and Omi couldn't hold her tears too. The moral of this story is that there is ability in every disability. Never look down on anyone due to their current situation or condition because you do not know what will happen to you tomorrow. In all, learn to be compassionate and kind to everyone you meet. Someone might be in their weakest moments, and your words may brighten their mood or day. Thank you so much for watching.